Lafia Mandala, Bibi Fahudia, is your favorite warrior, Black Panther, in the building once again with my Baba Ode, my colleague, my companion, my friend, Baba Ogundiran. We coming to you once again with another great topic from the Yoruba people. How you doing today, Baba?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I always forget to pull up the chat on my YouTube because people asking questions like, "You didn't answer my question." Like, I probably didn't see it. Sorry about that. So we are. I'm going to pull that up right now.
So while you're doing that, I'm gonna try to fix the camera a little better.
All right. Okay.
There we go.
All right. Got the chat up just in case. So, peace to everybody watching. Uh, this is a topic that is very intricate. It's very, you know, very deep topic. I will say that. And the title is exactly what it says. One's journey to and from the Arun. So, I hope that you got your pens and pads ready. We're going to go over this perspective. This is something that was voted on by the people. Let me just say that. We put up the quiz, or the selection, and we asked people, what do you want to see, next? Because we've done Orisha, we've done other topics, but what do you want to see next? So this is the topic that was voted on by the people, and it was kind of close. There was another topic out there that was neck and neck. So we followed the people, and here we are. So before we get started, let me send this link to some people that specifically asked for it. While I am doing that, hope everybody's having a good Saturday. I forgot that it was Saturday for a second.
I bet the time difference be throwing you off.
Yeah, man. You don't know how many temporary disagreements I've gotten with people about the date because they don't understand. It just is what it is. That is what it is. And I'm almost done sending this thing out. So this is what I'm going to do, since this is a topic where, you don't really, interrupt people and all of that nature. I'm going to let you go over, start to finish, and then I'm going to come back with the questions. Okay.
Woo. Start to finish.
Yeah, I ain't interrupting. I'm gonna go mute. I'm gonna let you go. Peace to Brother Chavis. Peace to Brother Ron. Peace to Pseudo Killer CK the Poet. Peace to Brother Ronald Brown. So without further ado, the one's journey to and from the Arun. On you.
All right. Well, I first like to say there are various different themes, and what I might say does not run universal across the Yoruba land. Maybe some of it does, maybe some of it doesn't. Traditions do change. So I want to put that out there up front. I'll share with what I know and what I've been taught, and just through the years of what I've picked up. So I guess we're going to Orun first. So let me first explain what.
Before you start, let's give a working definition of what the Arun is.
Orun, yes. Typically, a lot of times we relate it to Christian terminology where we say it's heaven. This is not true because of the undertone to which heaven necessarily applies. And then when you're in the Orun, that decision isn't made. Everyone goes to the Orun. It's through another process when you're there that you decide whether you stay in a necessarily good Orun or a bad Orun. But it seems to be in the same place. But the Orun is described as kind of like a sphere or a counter world per se. Sometimes Orun is related to the sky. So a lot of times they think the Orun is in the sky, but it seems to be like a parallel world that mimics our own, or at least to some extent. Not exactly, but people do the same things there. People work there, people hunt there. It's not really different than here. But the Orun itself is thought to be kind of like a sphere or like a different world or a counter world to this one that is supposedly, as far as what people decide where it's at, some people say it's, like a veil that you pull behind is actually here on Earth. Some people will say it's in the sky. I'm going to leave that up to people who want to debate that. But the Orun itself, a very simple way of really kind of thinking about it, it's where all people who pass go. It's not good or bad up front. It's where all people who pass go. It really depends on how you lived life, whether Orun is going to be good or whether Orun is going to be bad. Any questions, at least about Orun?
Nope. Let's move on.
All right. So when one passes, we're going to talk about regular people for a second before we move on to people that are initiated, because it's a little more complicated. I'm not going to get into particular ceremonies, but the funeral rites of a person are deeply important, particularly when it comes to the afterlife. So funeral rites should be done. There are rituals that are involved that are very important so that being has what they need and all rites are performed. So when they get to Orun or Arun, they have what they need to continue their journey. And I'll explain the journey in a second. But all funeral rites, there are standard kind of like funeral rites from one place to the other. I guess they would be somewhat the same, but of course traditions are traditions, so they will vary. But everyone has a funeral rite. When it comes to people who are initiated, it gets a little more complicated because now there are extra rituals and ceremonies that must be performed for the rites of that particular divinity. And it's not a universal thing. Each divinity has its own funeral rites. And they're very important as well. Because it is believed, like, let's say with Ogun, if the Kilmonger is not chanted during a hunter's funeral rites, or someone who is initiated to Ogun during their funeral rites, the funeral poems, it is believed that they will not meet with Ogun in the afterlife. So, and a lot of this is also true when it comes to other divinities. Some divinities' funeral rites are more extensive than others. Then you have to make mention of people that are initiated to multiple Orisha. So this gets a little confusing, but each one of those, I guess, in some extent, would have to have some kind of ritual that may be done for that particular Orisha. And how you would probably, or how I would assume, I'm trying to remember what I was told about this. I think the more active you are in one Orisha is the one that gets the most rituals done for that particular Orisha. And all the Orishas that other person is initiated to, other rituals or the more important rituals will be done for them, but not necessarily the whole, ritual itself. So after your funeral rites are done, and funeral rites do take several days. But as far as the passing into the next life, um, the Yorubas believe in a multiple soul. So multiple things go with you. When you first die, Emi, which is believed to be the breath, or some people call it soul or spirit, the Emi is the first thing that kind of leaves because this is what animates your body. Emi is sometimes thought of to be the daughter of Olodumare, and Olodumare gives you Emi to animate you, or Emi is his breath that gave you life or animates your body. So when you pass, that last, if anyone's ever worked in the medical field, I've seen this kind of few times. What I think sometimes they call a death rattle right before someone passes, that last breath that leaves the body. Sometimes that is thought of Emi leaving the body. Um, of course, when Emi leaves the body, your physical body stays there, the Ara, your physical body. The Emi returns back. Your Ojiji, the shadow, returns back. And also, I guess what you would say, your Orinu, your personality, who you are, that thing that made that contract with Olodumare also returns back. And me goes to where it needs to go. The Ojiji goes to where it needs to go. And that part for which is you returns back. And the things for which were done at your funeral, I'm trying to keep this as short as possible because this can actually be, talked about for a long time. So I'm just trying to hit the major points. So when you come back, if your funeral rites were done, you will have money. You might even have food along with you to take to the marketplace, because the marketplace is going to be the first place you stop before you go anywhere when you get back to the afterlife. Because you need to pick up materials and things for your journey to go visit Olodumare. And when you make this journey, or the purpose of this journey is to be judged for your deeds and what you have done while you were on earth. So how this works, then your character plays a very big part in your journey. But if you get to the marketplace and your funeral rites were not done and you don't have these things, you have no money to buy food or buy clothing or buy things you need for this journey. This journey is long. During your funeral rites, if they didn't give you food, you have no food to which to eat. At least for how I understand it was explained to me. So those rights and things that are given help within when you get back to the afterlife and go back to the marketplace to which you buy your items to make your trip. So as you are walking, or after you leave the marketplace, if you lived a fairly decent and good life, your journey is going to be peaceful. The sun will be at your back. You will have a light breeze. The weather will be fine. There may be fruit on the trees that you find. If no one did perform certain funeral rites for you, you might find food along the way, or visitors of people sitting down and eating. But when you have done a lot of lie, cheat, crime, hurt people, murder, your way will be sought with all kinds of peril. The weather will be treacherous. It may be tearing down rain and thundering. You will find no shelter nor food. You will be chased by wild animals. You may get attacked by snakes. That journey will be perilous. And the thing is, you do not die. You have to experience all this. So your character holds your way as far as how well the journey is going to be, or how bad that journey is going to be when it comes to things that are outside of your control, such as the weather, the animals, the environment. But eventually, when you reach this place, which is considered kind of high and far away or up in the sky, there's really a lot of debate about where this place is. Um, you eventually make your way to see Olodumare again, and you're judged. And you're judged for what you've done on earth. So, particularly if you lived a good life, fairly decent, you get to go back and live your life according to, in Orun, where the marketplace says, go back to your family, back to your home, and live life. Um, there are some debates, like if you were married and if you were a woman, if you would return back to your husband's house or whether you would return back to your father's house. There are kind of debates about these things. Some of these things are very unclear. But if you lived a bad life, um, you are punished in a sense that I think the literature says something like you are meant to cling on trees like butterflies and bats. So it seems to be that you are attached and bonded to certain trees or whatnot, or the punishment is, you're active as a spirit or something to be worked as, or as I guess, as a slave or some sort. So it's not a life that you want per se, because you're always going to be attached or locked to something and always have to work for something or somebody. So it's not a very good life. And I'm sure there are other versions that speak deeply more and other places that it might get a little more detailed. But like I said, I'm just trying to keep it simple. So this is pretty much your way from after you pass all the way up until you get judged. Now, the other way around, coming back, let's say if you lived a good life and you want to come back and visit, the interaction between let's say heaven again, heaven and earth, um, is a back and forth. Earth is also considered a type of marketplace. When your relatives leave and go to earth, sometimes you miss them and you want to visit them. So you come back, you may want to go back to earth for whatever reason. So the thing that is done first is, and there's bunches of stories. So I'm going to give you three situations, which are the three that I've seen of how a destiny is kind of given or attached to, or you have, or you're affixed to. Um, Two of them really have to come with presenting yourself in front of Olodumare. Um, and the first one is called Ayemo or Ayamo. And this is when Olodumare affixes a destiny to you. You don't have a choice in this matter. You're given a destiny to fulfill. Um, Another one is what they call hold on, I gotta look at my notes. I don't remember it. Akun Legba, which is received kneeling. This is when you're in front of Olodumare and you basically ask for what you want in life. Saying, I want to be born into by this person of my family. I want to experience this. I want to travel here. I want to go there. I want to live this long. And that's the other way. The third way seems to be a lot of confusion. Sometimes it's thought to be kneeling in front of Olodumare, but I've heard stories of where it takes place when you're in the marketplace. Because after you receive a destiny, typically you go to the marketplace again to pick up items. Maybe you want divination done before you go. For various reasons, you stop by the marketplace. But there's an interesting story that I hear about. I think it's Ajala, which is the potter in heaven, who has his little stand at the marketplace where he sells these different pots or these little jars with little lids on them. And each of them are identical. Some of them are different, but you don't know what is what. So these are considered where in some stories where they are taught to choose a destiny, but they don't quite know what that destiny is. So the interesting story is Ajala is always running from creditors. So there's a story about, I don't remember the character and I don't remember what Odu it comes from, but it talks about a character who wants to go to Earth, but he is in a rush. So he kind of bypasses Olodumare and wants to go receive a destiny from Ajala. But he ended up getting a divination before he made that travel to the market. And through that divination, the diviner told him to place a certain amount of money at the edge of Ajala's stand. So when he gets there, Ajala's not there. He ends up putting the money there and putting like a stone on top of it to hold the money. And as he begins to walk away, he sees another person approaching. This person is the creditor. He ends up taking the money and ends up walking away. Jala ends up coming out from the back of the stand because he was hiding from the creditor and thanks the person and helps him to choose out a good pot for a good destiny. So it would appear that when you go to choose those, sometimes Jala might not help you. You just choose a pot. Sometimes if there's a favor done or if you purchase one, sometimes he may choose for you. And then, of course, after this, you leave the market. All these three after leaving the market will end up at a center point, which they kind of like call the crossroads in heaven. It's like an intersection, not related to a crossroad, more of a T junction, but that has been doubled. So instead of a junction that has 3 ways, it would have 6 ways. And sometimes I've even heard it referred to 9 ways. And it's through this passage of where we meet Eshu, and we kind of restate our destiny to Eshu. And it's through this moment that we actually make our journey to Earth, where we pass through the blood and indigo rivers, which is basically the womb and come out, and now we're on Earth. But unfortunately, at this time, we forget our lot and destiny. So this is the purpose of actually having that the Esentaye reading the 3rd day after you are born to establish what your lot is, and use that reading as a roadmap for the parent on how to govern the child to best fulfill his destiny in life. So I think that pretty much sums it up.
Wow, that's a lot of information, and you know, a very condensed but complex summary of one's journey to the Arun and back to Earth. As my brother Sean said, sounds a lot like Kemet or Egypt. And being that I've studied both cultures, I do see a lot of the similarities between the two cultures. So I definitely agree with you there, brother Sean. I have a few questions to ask. So this sit down with Olodumare to discuss, you know, your destiny, your, you know, what your lot will be in life and what you will do, and how important is the Ori, the head, in this process?
That lot is actually like whatever that contract, agreement, whatever you're affixed to, that is actually your Ori. That is what actually becomes personified as your lot in life, what it's trying to fulfill itself. It has a memory of its own. So when you're born, regardless of whether you get the divination or not, your Ori is going to try to fulfill its contract that it's made or its agreement that it's made, whether you remember it or not.
So you agreed to do whatever, and you get to Earth, and for whatever reason start moving in another direction. So you're actually fighting against yourself in a sense.
Yes, in a sense, because you're trying to go one way and your lot is trying to fulfill itself, so it's going another way. It's often
Mm,
the times why things might not be working out in someone's life, or if they are, why they have to struggle to maintain it.
mm. That is that's very interesting, but that's kind of why our ritual of divination is important
Mhm.
to point these things out. I would suggest, but that's an interesting concept because people can want something so badly, but it might not be for them.
Mhm.
You know, so I think that speaks to that.
And, and it doesn't mean they can't obtain it. It
Right.
just means they're just not, it's not. The problem is when we come here without a clear understanding of what we're supposed to be doing, we end up doing anything. Sometimes it works out, because if we want to relate Ori to a subconscious, more of like something that records and memorizes something, if it remembers to go do something, it's going to go do something, regardless of whether you are conscious of it or not. Or even a lot of times, I often wonder personally whether we do things based on our lot or driven in certain directions based on our lot. We just aren't aware of it.
Hmm. Interesting concept indeed. So you mentioned, I think you said Aja or Aja Mopin is always running from creditors, and this is the person with the pots that represent, lots in life. Can you is this person associated with any deity that we may know of, or any Orisha?
I have often heard of Ajala associated with Obatala. I don't know whether there's a direct association, but they're both potters.
Hmm.
So I can see if there is one, okay, but if there isn't one, I can see where the correlation is because they are both potters and they both work with clay. So they both mold. So a lot of times you hear him molding the head. Sometimes and there's another, I think, where they might get that confused with Obatala, but I think it more has to do with molding that pot or that destiny or that lot and shaping it in the same way you would form and shape a pot or a piece of pottery. Matter of fact,
Interesting.
molding and pottery and clay is often used to describe one's character, or when they mold their character, it's often referred to as like clay, like how you would mold clay.
That makes a lot of sense that Abatala would be involved, or a version of him, or something related to him would be involved in that process. That makes sense. So, one thing I wanted you to discuss is the creation of humans through the Yoruba lens, as far as you covered the breath, but and the motive of the head with Obatala, but where does their skeleton come from?
Well, let's back up. The molding of the head in the from Ajala is more. I think personally is a more of a reference because we often look at the lot of someone's life as their head. So I think it's allegory. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's allegory. But Obatala actually molds the whole body.
Mm,
He's the one that creates human form. So our
okay.
scars, the way we're born, is all due to Obatala. The framework, which is our skeleton, is provided by Ogun, which gives us the ability to stand upright because of our skeleton, our frame. So Obatala molds this over a framework of this clay, kind of like if you've ever seen kind of the little artists drawing statues that you can mold clay over, using that as like the spine or the structure of it to give it like strength to stand up, and we just shape the body over it. And then through the process of that, it is Olodumare that then breathes life into this clay object, which animates man.
Understood. Why do you think? Because I don't really hear Ogun's name involved in that process in any books, or you know the banter in the community. Why do you think he's left out of that process generally?
There's a lot of theories that I have personally. It would probably take a lot more time than what we have here. But I just think because we often, when we think of man, sometimes we relate it to Christian. So when they have the same idea of forming out of clay, there really is no mention of a spine or structure or something that holds that clay thing up. So I think a lot of times when we just hear about Allah forming of man, it's assumed that he's also has to do with the it's like it's just him that has to do with that process. Because it has been written. I know in I believe by Professor Abim Bala in his book Ifa Mohamedra Broken World, I think makes mention of Ogun providing the skeleton while Obatala molds clay around it to form man. And just to mention, there also Eshu is also known and through various Odu, both in Ifa and Odu Osha, that speak of Eshu learning how to make eyes and noses, and certain parts from Obatala. I just think that would be interesting to mention. But often, people that are pregnant often pray to Obatala that their child is not misformed, that their child is handsome, regardless of what divinity they necessarily belong to, because it's Obatala that does that. He's responsible for all that. He creates as he chooses.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so you mentioned a point when you're coming to the earth that is associated with Eshu, and I know that to be associated with a stone. Can you talk more about that point?
The stone eludes me. I believe you know the name. I just can't think of it right this moment. What's the name of the stone?
Ogiyi, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, it's still referring to. It would be the center point of that kind of intersection I was talking about. That's the place you would go. Whether it's the stone, I've also heard of a ram being there. So regardless of what it is, it's that intersection point where you leave Arun. But this is also in some literature where you have to restate your destiny to Eshu. This is one of the reasons why all the Opanifa, Eshu's face is there, because he bears witness to everyone's destiny. Even if he's not present during the time of it, you still have to restate it to him before you even get to come here.
Okay. So, all right. That makes sense. Okay, so that's why he's associated with that stone. So this is probably a question that people have been wondering. What happens in the Yoruba culture if you pass before your time?
I'm sure there's plenty of stories, but the one that I'm familiar with is of course, your body's going to have a funeral, right? All that's going to happen. But apparently, at least something that could happen. I don't know if it happens all the time, but it's kind of supernatural. Well, not kind of, it actually is. So what happens is that family that you belong to, of course, if you have kids and family, they bury you. What happens is your spirit will linger here and somehow attach itself to another physical form of you. And it still will be you. You will kind of be like spirit, but within a physical body. Kind of. I'll explain this in a second. You can be touched or not, you can be prodded, you are physical, but you do not reside in the town or place that you are in. You leave. And it is believed that this person that you are or still are can have another family, have children. But if another person were to recognize that person will vanish. And I would assume that he starts that process and goes somewhere else until his time that he was allotted to be on Earth ends.
Wow, that is a interesting concept. Wow, that's definitely something that to ponder upon. Um, so another question I have is the marketplace that you talked about when you leave Earth, going towards the Arun, and you have to
Mhm.
gather your items in order to go to eventually see Olodumare. Is there anyone that controls that marketplace,
What do you mean by controls it?
or someone that sells you the items, or
Oh no,
um,
it's like any. I mean, just think of a flea market or or farmers market. It's just like that. It's an open air market, people selling different things as you would have a Yoruba market nowadays. Same type of thing. It's not governed by necessarily any one person. It's a marketplace where people go to achieve, items and get what they need.
Interesting, interesting. And I wanted to highlight this comment by Saletta Hickman because, as you've told me, Baba, depending on the Yoruba movie, uh, you know, they play out a lot of these stories and ritual dramas in their movies, depending on
Mhm.
the movie that you watch. So people that have been in this tradition for a long time, like yourself and others, can tell you movies to watch this play out. Before the Nollywood problem we have with them and the way they portray Orisha, there are actually a lot of good movies, and still are, but they're just um, in between the other movies. But there are a lot of good movies that play out some of the things that Baba Ogundiran is talking about.
Yeah, there's a I wish I can remember the movie, but I remember it had to do with a husband that ended up killing his daughter because of his wife, and she turned into or somehow became a bird. And she used to mock the wife because the wife was jealous of the relationship between him and his daughter. And it the reason I say it because it gets back into those how people might die and stay here to do certain things, why
Mm,
they're here, or take revenge or linger, but yeah, definitely I've seen quite a few movies, even with Odisha, particularly older ones are better. The quality, if you can get past that, there are some good movies out there if you want to see it visually, you
mm,
know and then again, one thing I do want to say as far as movies as well, just be careful of about the narrative of the director that you're getting it from, because
mhm.
there are some good movies, there are some narratives that are put in there that aren't necessarily true. Like in the movie Oduduwa, their narrative is that Oduduwa came from Mecca.
Oh boy. So
So
this is
they show
obviously,
this in the beginning of the movie.
yeah, it's
So
obviously a director with an agenda to push the Islamic narrative in the culture.
now,
Uh,
once they get out of Mecca and get to Ile Ife, the movie's good.
but you got to get through that.
Yeah, you just got to
If-
get that to that part of it.
okay.
Uh,
Well,
there's, there's another good movie called Yemonja that is that's very good. Though it talks about Yemonja, the movie is really about Ifa. Uh, uh, and it gives a good example of how Babalaos work together and how students work with them and how they actually do things together. There's a lot of good movies out there.
awesome. One thing I haven't heard of yet is the idea of rest. In the West, the Western world, we put up the RIP, rest in peace to so and so who has passed away, a loved one. Is resting in the Arun, is that something that fits or not?
Good question. I guess it would really depend on the individual. I mean, because I get what they mean by it, but if I'm in an afterlife, I don't want to be laying in a bed and resting all the time. Personally, if I have the means, and especially the way they portray their afterlife, we still get to do things. We still get to work our farm. We still get to cook. It's still a life. I guess that's why it's called an afterlife. But I guess if resting is part of what you enjoy in life, I guess resting could fit.
Yeah,
but I think more.
Go ahead.
I think more of rest, at least in the way that I look at it, is that the spirit lay to rest. That it's not angry. That it's not stuck here. At least when I think about it, and when I say, at least when I say it, be at peace. Let them lay to rest. Rest in the sense that in this life, your turmoils are over. Move on to the next. Don't be restless here.
Move on to your next turmoils in the other life.
Well, in the good heaven, though, when people, it seems to be people that are poor in their life here will be poor in the next life. But it seems to be, well, then again, I have a thing about poor, because poor is a circumstance that another person labeled somebody. I mean, I've been to the Philippines plenty of time and seen people who are poor, but when you go up there, they don't know the definition of poor.
Right.
This is just their life. It's what they do. So, and a lot of them are happy. So I just don't think there's like any kind of really true hardship in a sense. Like, I don't think you starve in the afterlife.
There's no capitalism in the Arun.
It doesn't seem that I can't say for sure, but I don't think it doesn't appear to be, because even the poor seem to have everything they need.
Interesting.
Even if like you farm in the afterlife, maybe if you farm, depending on how much you put in will depend on how much you get out, but you will always get something out if you put something in. I'm not saying, food magically grows on trees. But then again, this is all speculation. I haven't been and traveled back and said this is the way it is. So, but a lot of the literature about the afterlife is there's a lot of it, and a lot of it doesn't agree, and a lot of it does. But there are a lot of gaps. Like for instance, when they talk about Ogun and you have these funeral rites done, it talks about when coming back, this is the first person you see.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Where in other literature, it will say, no, you go to the marketplace first. So, there are inconsistencies in it. And this could be for various reasons. It could be from different tradition to tradition, or maybe with certain orishas that they do meet you, and maybe they're the ones who guide you. I don't know.
Understood. I get this question a lot. So who or what decides whether you return to Earth or remain in the Arun?
Okay, I know a lot of times in the West, we have this concept of once we have fulfilled our lot and everything, we don't come back. That doesn't seem to be the case in this. Traveling seems to take place consistently. So the only thing that I have come across where it stops you, if you come and you are judged in a way that you are punished, you're not allowed to come back. Or if you do come back, you are like a spirit stuck or clung or cling to something like a tree or a place. You don't have freedom to roam. You're not actually back to enjoy. You don't have this, this physical form. But people who generally do well in life, who are generally good people, have the option to come back and forth. And this would make sense because you're typically or generally thought of born into the same family. And since there's more than one family member of you at a time, it seems that you are rotating. There are a few of you rotating in and out, like coming here to Earth, and y'all stay there. And they even speak about this in literature where someone like their child may be on Earth and they miss their child. So they want to go see their child, so they'll come to Earth. And maybe be born as the brother or sister to that person.
So keeping that in mind, what you just said, we are actually our ancestors in the Yoruba culture.
Mm-hmm. They live on within us. We are a byproduct of them. Well, we are actually them, yes.
I wanted to drive that home. So when we hear these narratives and see these memes, I'm not my ancestors, I fight back and all of those. Yeah, you are. So he was a coward as a human. Guess what?
Like this is where I really appreciate the term. Like I tell my daughter, regardless of what happens with me, I'll always be with you. I live on within you physically, and we're attached to that same family line. I'll see you again.
Wow. Wow.
I don't know who she is here,
right,
but when we get back, I'm like, oh yeah.
It's like a reunion. It's a family, right. Family reunion in the Aruba. This is why I say I never use the rest in peace thing. That's why I always say safe journey home, because you're going back to a place that is actually your home. And I'm sure you've heard this saying, what is it? Earth is the marketplace. But heaven is home.
Yes.
So I always say safe journey home, no matter who transitions or pass away. That's a loved one or somebody that is, we love in the community. I always say safe journey home and never rest in peace, because I'm trying to get the more African narrative of them passing. And that safe journey home seems to fit it more than, RIP or rise power or other things that people say. So I always try to say just safe journey home. And we don't know how long that journey will be according to the person. So I just wish them safe journey home, and I let that be that. I'm going to look in the chat section for some questions, because I know people were asking.
During funeral rites, there is a certain length of time. I don't know whether it's 30 days or 40 days, or slightly more or slightly less of the distance it takes them to travel to the market to Orun. So there are different rituals that are done at the time, then a little while later, and then might even be a ritual that is done for the deceased the following year, depending on where you are at and what type of traditions. I thought that might be something to bring up as well. So
understood. I appreciate you, Golden Juice. We're going to continue with this series as we get more topics. Sister Soletta Hickman asks, is it true that SU activates eyes and face? Now, I heard you say something earlier about him being or having the ability to make them, but what about activating?
I don't know what she's getting it from, and I don't know what it means by activate, because when I think of activating one's eyes, I think of opening them and allowing you to see.
Yeah.
And that process actually comes in, from my understanding, when the breath comes in, or
So
somehow, but
below.
between the breath and when your body, comes, when that your spirit comes through and gives breath to it. I'm not quite sure what that may mean. I don't know whether it's allegory or alluding to something,
Hmm.
because plenty of Orisha, like for instance, as you know, there are a lot of references to Ogun's eyes
Right,
as
being of a type.
being of a rare type. There's another one where it talks about Ogun owns the eyes to make a man's body turn.
Mhm.
Another one where it says he possessor of the leper's eyes. So all these definitely have meanings behind them to particular things, but I don't know whether there's a deeper meaning behind that. So I can't really answer that truthfully. You know, I wouldn't know. I don't know what it means by activate in the context for which he's getting it from.
I would guess that was being a Lodimare thing,
Hmm.
um, just from the Emmy narrative, the breath, the spirit being something that he gives to man. Without that, there's no opening of eyes, nose, mouth, none of that.
Yeah,
So
because without breath,
you can't do nothing.
you can't do anything. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Sister Janelle Maria says, you mentioned those who pass having food and money on their journey. For those who have passed on and were buried according to Western standards, does this present a problem?
No, that's a good question. I guess the problem is for whom? To them who were buried in the customs, if this is what they believed in, then I would not take that away from them, nor anyone who chooses to believe what they want to believe and be buried in the customs for what they believe in. They have that choice, they have that right. Um, when it comes to Yoruba culture, um, there might be an issue with it because, okay, so let's take for instance cremation. Though cremation is a viable object here, a lot of people do it, it's cheaper. To the Yoruba, cremation is often thought of suffering, so they don't cremate bodies. And there are situations where they do, but most of the time, and it's for a particular reason, if they might cremate the body, it's not generally done. But this has a particular set of circumstances to it. But generally, they don't burn the body because it's thought to bring suffering to the spirit. Because fire brings, along suffering, damage, death. So I guess, in my opinion, it really depends on the individual. I don't really see a problem with it personally, um, because each person believes what they're going to believe in. As long as, if you believe in this particular way and this is the way you want to be buried, then it's fine. Now, if you want to get into the afterlife and how they might necessarily look at it, I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure in some ways through wars, fighting with other people, people didn't have burial rights there. And I don't know all what consisted of those burial rights to really make a comparison between, how we bury people here in the West versus what they do there standardly. I have a good idea, but I don't have all the, ins and outs of that ritual.
Understood. So, from your understanding, like if a Christian was born, they believed in, you know, Jesus and everything like that, that wouldn't be a problem because of what they believed in. Before someone who practiced, Isese or traditional Orisha worship, uh, then that's something different.
Yeah, that's something different. But that's even true a lot of not times a day. A lot of people that are initiated to Odisha are still buried in a Christian
Mm,
manner.
mm, interesting.
Uh, there's a lot of people. It's because, in my opinion, I can't say this as a fact, but we don't have a lot of people that do funeral rites
Mm,
and just basic funeral rites. We won't even talk about any particular divinity and what needs to be added between what, but just standard funeral rites. It's a thing that I wish, people would get together, and at least a group or two start because it's something we need in the community. It's
mm,
something we just don't have.
interesting.
Mhm.
Uh, Sister
Especially
John.
since one more, especially since you spend all this money to get initiated, head shaven, start over in life, and take these obligations just to kind of on the back end of it not fulfill them and not be buried within the tradition that you spent all your time, money, sweat, and tears doing.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. Sister Janelle also says, is there anything that can be done a year or two later, or is this strictly based on the tradition as followed? I assume she's talking about people within the tradition that may have been buried in another, religion or but practiced Orisha
Practice
work.
differently.
Right.
Yeah.
So they can be doing on the back end.
If you're referring to in a sense of a ritual or something, no. But if you're looking to create like the Yoruba people have their own grave sites for each individual person that passed. And these grave sites or their family graves are not connected to a gungun. This is gungun is something different. So there is a traditional way to which these grave sites are presented and made. And there are some variations and some stuff due to time that we can adapt that will allow us, in a sense, to maybe have that loved one's grave with us or something that may represent it. And that we may be able to put like in a small box and maybe put a little dirt on it. And then we could use that as actually the grave site and actually perpetuate that spirit if we need be. But that's the only thing that I can really think of. I don't want to get into how you would do that. That's more of for people that are interested and want to learn more about that. That's something I would want to talk about privately because that has to do with learning ritual casting. So it's something a little different, but it definitely is possible because the Yoruba typically bury their loved ones in their home in the ground, typically in a room that is connected to the home. But there is a way, even in Nigeria, where some of the laws have changed, where now they're burying people in cemeteries. There are still certain rites being performed that they can actually do certain things that they can take home and now wash. Even if they were buried in a Christian fashion, they kind of make a, for lack of a better word, prop, and they do the ritual work to this necessarily prop and bury that prop in the home. But of course, it's much smaller. It's not a body.
Understood. Understood. Are there any other questions from the chat? This was a very informative discussion. I appreciate you coming through and giving this knowledge because I think it's overlooked, or I can't even say overlooked. I skipped altogether in most circles that I've been around. So um, thank you for coming through and doing this.
Oh,
This was a great
absolutely.
topic that the people picked, and this is definitely something that was needed. Peace, brother Seneb. It's good seeing you, brother. Um, Promote because you're starting classes that will not be on this channel. So promote your classes that you got coming up and
Oh,
talk about
well, there's let me before I there's some classes that I'm looking to put up. The next one, the one that I just gave was kind of an introduction to OB divination and its how should I say, is diversity of the OB. I will be doing another paid class that you can pay for. I think I'll be doing it next month, toward the middle of the month or toward the end. And this will be a history class having to deal with Ile Ife and the war between Obatala and Oduduwa, and explaining the mythological the mythology behind that and the history behind that. It's going to be maybe a 2 hour, an hour, no, maybe an hour and a half to 2 hour class, just due to the material. I'm not quite sure of the price yet. And there are other classes that I do teach. I also do teach privately. For anyone that is interested, just please contact me on Facebook at Kaaro. I do provide classes for various Orisha for worship. I do give unofficial training for Ifa, as well as I do training and mentorship for Ogun, and various aspects within the tradition itself. And again, I do group classes, and I do lectures on various other topics. I just can't really think of any right off the top of my head. Like I do a name class to where I explain about names, the importance of names, the classifications of names, gets into how they name people, naming ceremony. I also give other classes on introduction to like certain forms of divination. This isn't really a class to teach you divination. This is more for people to see the different types of divination there are in Yoruba culture and have an idea of what they're looking at. So if they ever go get one of these divinations, they're not looking at like, what the hell is going on? I'm confused. He's talking in some other language, to give them an idea of what they're doing. And just give them a little bit of insight to other forms of Yoruba divination. I also, in that class, I also go out some of the forms of divination that aren't so popular, such as 3-shell divination, 4-shell divination. Um, what is it? I'm trying to think of the reading of palm fold leaves. So I get into other forms of divination and through different divinities as well, because the Yoruba culture has various forms of divination that may be attached to Orisha, that some are not attached to Orisha, some are just different forms of divination. 16 Kari shell and Ifa divination and Obi are not the only forms of divination within the Yoruba culture. But I also do give private classes. If anyone wants to host me for a lecture or bring me in, this is also things that I do that I'm open to do, that I've done in the past. So like I said, if anyone's interested in anything that I may do, or I do provide a 16 card show reading as well, and work for Ogun. Like I said, you can reach me at Ilearu. Just message me privately.
All right. And as always, if you look in the description of this video, we'll pick up the Conscious Community's first ever Pan-African Journal, Volume 1 and 2, Kilmonger's Corner. You can always do that. The link is in the description if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, you can go to Amazon, type in Kilmonger's Corner. It'll pop right up. Or not, just send me a private message on Facebook and I'll direct you from there. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for listening to this in-depth conversation and being invested into African culture. Anything you want to say in closing, Baba Ogundiran?
No, just look forward to our next topic. I'm interested to see what topics we pull up to get the community to choose. It's always interesting to me what the community really is interested in looking to learn.
Absolutely. So thank you all for coming. As I said, Odabo, which means goodbye in the Yoruba language.
Odabo.
Until next time.
Odigbo.